So, hello, my name's Jamie. I'm an ecologist, and I'm coming to you live from my caravan on my driveway. But I work for Wildlife Trust. You can see it here on my t-shirt. I work principally in the North Somerset area. A lot of you tuning in from North Somerset, which is fab. And I'll talk a little bit about the work that I do there later on. But the main thing you guys are here to do tonight is to talk butterflies, I know. So let's get started. If it'll work. There we are. So first of all, let's get down to the basics. What is a butterfly? Let's get out of the way first. Well, a butterfly, there is an insect. Now, insects you're probably familiar with. In its most basic form, an insect has three main body parts: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. They've got 6 legs. They've all got 6 legs. Even in their larval forms, they've all got 6 legs. Even caterpillars have got 6 true legs. We'll have a look at a picture of a caterpillar coming up. The butterfly is one of an order, within the order of insects known as the Lepidoptera, the scaled wings. And if you look close enough at a butterfly's wings, you'd see they did have scales all over them. A bit like pixels, they come in different colors, and that means that butterflies can have wonderful patterns and color morphs, which we'll talk about obviously a fair bit tonight. Butterflies feed on flowers principally, and they feed using a proboscis or a proboscis or a proboscis, if you want to say it wrong. It's this feeding apparatus just here. You may well have seen that if you ever get close enough to a butterfly in the wild. Now, butterflies, unlike the cartoons would have you believe, they have 4 wings, not 2 big lobed wings, 4 wings, which they do move in pairs. So granted, it does look as if they've got 2 wings. They flap them in a figure of 8, which is easier said than done. I'm not very good at it, but the butterflies are great at it. And if you've been out and about today, in fact, you've probably seen some doing just that. Now, there are 180,000 species of butterfly worldwide, thereabouts. It's not exactly 180,000, of course. And you'll be just as relieved to know that we're not going to go through them all tonight. We're not going to go through anywhere near that many. It's far too hot for that, and we just don't have the time. Butterflies, as I'm sure you know, are really, really valuable pollinators. They have a wonderful relationship with flowering plants, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail coming up. Butterflies are, and I've used the term there, cold-blooded. It's not completely accurate because they don't have blood. They have something called hemolymph, as it says there, not actually blood. But what I mean by cold-blooded is that they can't thermoregulate like we can, like the mammals can. So they need environmental warmth to be active. They need sunshine. So on days like today, those butterflies that are about are very, very active. They've got lots and lots of energy. You'll see them on when it's a little bit cooler than today. When they need to make an effort to gain some of that heat, they will bask in the sunshine. They will sit there and open up their wings wide and absorb that heat. In colder weather, they'll do the opposite. They'll close those wings up so they don't lose as much heat because, as I said, they need that external heat in order to do anything, to get up in the morning. Butterflies evolved about 100 million years ago in the mid-Cretaceous. So the first butterflies were out and about alongside the dinosaurs, which is just fab. I was speaking to an entomologist recently who said that it turns out that butterflies have actually evolved 3 different times. That is to say that the group we call butterflies can be split into 3 smaller groups, which all had separate branches from the Lepidopteran tree, but all of them originated, their ancestors were what we know today as moths, or at least ancestral versions thereof. The butterflies were some of these Lepidopteran species which decided to become diurnal. That means active during the day. Moths, as you know, are mainly active at night. There are lots of diurnal species too, though. The butterflies decided we're going to become active in the day. To make the most of this brand newfangled thing, which was around at the time, it was new on the scene, flowers, flowering plants. They wanted to make the most of it. And the flowering plants decided they'd make the most of them as well. Not just the butterflies, other flying insects too. Plants would advertise these their nectar, which was there to attract flying insects in, not so that they could, make friends with them or anything like that. No. You know how pollination works. They were trying to invite the insects in to collect pollen and inadvertently pass it from flower to flower. It suited the flowering plants really well, and the butterflies were more than happy to oblige when they got that lovely treat of sweet nectar at the base. In the 100 million years that have passed since then, the 2 groups have co-evolved to produce a suite of really, really lovely mechanisms by which one pollinates the other, one feeds the other, and they've adapted together over those millennia. Bright colours evolved in the butterflies, much more so than you see in most of our moths. and patterns and all sorts of things that we're going to see tonight, we're going to explore tonight. Because now they can see one another. Once they become diurnal, they could see one another. So they're going to make the most of it. They wanted to attract mates visually this time without just using pheromones, and also to startle predators, which again, can see them now. In Britain, we've got about 59 species of butterfly. I don't like to put an exact figure on species of any group because it changes. It changes. New species are discovered, species are reclassified. Some species go extinct, though. We try and avoid that, obviously, but around 59 for the sake of argument. Now, talking about going extinct, 76% of those butterfly species have declined in the last 4 decades, and 5 have become extinct in the last 5 years. That's not great going at all. But I'm sure it's not a surprise to you. There are so many of our species worldwide, which are showing similar trends. A worrying number of species showing a worrying gradient of decline. The life cycle of butterflies, I think you'll all be quite familiar with. I said we'd look at a picture of a caterpillar, and here's one here. So we're all quite familiar with this process, I think, so I won't spend too long on it. Butterflies begin, as most insects do, as an egg. They then hatch into a caterpillar. Now, I said earlier on, and it throws some people when I mention it, that caterpillars, again, not as the cartoons would have you believe, but caterpillars actually do only have 6 legs. And you can see them here in this picture. These are the 6 legs here, 3 pairs there. Everything else that he's clinging onto that plant with, they're not legs, they're not true legs. They're called pseudopods, false feet. But caterpillars, like all insects, have 6 legs, only 6 legs. Caterpillars, as you know, feed on mainly the greenery of plants, and they will feed and feed and feed and grow and grow and grow until they're ready to turn into an adult. And they do that by metamorphosing, by forming themselves a chrysalis, a cocoon here, and metamorphosing into an adult. Now, this is not the complete life cycle of one species. This caterpillar is not the same as this adult. This adult here is a speckled wood. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk speckled woods later on. Now, this is an important place where we can stop and just talk about the reason why this caterpillar looks so different to the butterfly. And this is a mechanism that you see in lots and lots of insect species where the larval form leads a totally different life to the adult form. They feed on totally different things. And that's the crux of it. It reduces intra-specific competition within the same species by niche separation. They live in separate niches. The adults and the offspring occupy separate niches and therefore don't compete with one another. There's a very good reason for that, and that's it. They're not the only insects to do it. As I said, if you look at things like dragonflies, mayflies, all of those insects which have their larval form in the water, the adults and the nymphs are never in competition with one another. And that's exactly why. So you can impress your friends at parties with that sort of knowledge. Now, some butterflies migrate. They migrate quite impressive distances rather. Some, as you can see there, come to the UK from as far away as Africa. Now, I say they migrate. They don't do it on their own. They migrate over several generations. The population moves northward following the emergence of their particular food plant, and then back down again over, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. And they do it over several generations. That is to say that those butterflies that are on the wing in Africa, it's not those that reach our shores in Britain, rather it's their grandchildren. And it's the grandchildren of those butterflies that are then on the wing back in Africa a few months later on. Some of the migrant species are actually quite familiar ones that you've probably seen out and around perhaps this year already, such as the red admiral, pictured here, look, and the painted lady. Now, this is what you're really here for, though. I've given you a little bit of background to the butterflies there, but what you're really after is how to ID them. So don't worry, we've got that bit out of the way. Grab your pen and paper if you like, or be prepared to commit this all to memory. There won't be a test. We might test a few, but nobody's being marked. There's no pass or fail here. Now, when you're identifying butterflies, sorry, I'm just going to have a little drink. Because it is exceptionally hot today, especially in a caravan. As I said, when it comes to identifying butterflies, there are a few key factors we can look at. So we'll break it down into the main components of what butterflies actually look like. First and foremost, and arguably the most useful when you see a butterfly at a distance, is the base color. What color was it? Was it white? Was it orange? Was it brown? Was it blue? That at least helps you to narrow down that 59 figure to a much smaller number, depending on which color you've gone for. If you can get a little bit closer, there are lots of other markings that we can then look for. Eye markings like this one, these eye spots, they're to startle predators, and just a few of our species have these. but they're really distinctive when you do see them. On others, you've got bands. This is that red admiral we looked at a second ago, and you've got these bright coloured bands which really stand out against the dark background. Some have spots on the wings, and some of them have contrasting wingtips. These are some of the more obvious identifying features that you might be able to see. If you're really close, or if you've got the opportunity to get a better look, then you might be able to gauge the size of the species. Not often that easy to gauge, I must admit. They very seldom sit next to each other, quite conveniently like this. And even then, the size differences between some of these species is not vast. So size is a bit of a tricky thing, but it can help to ID butterflies. The shape of them as well. The shape can be really important. Some of these species have really distinctive shapes. Granted, none of them are quite that shape. That's what I could do with Microsoft PowerPoint. I hope you'll excuse that. But yeah, there are none quite that shape, but some of them have got distinctive shapes, as you'll see later on. Their behavior can also help you to tell what's going on, what species it is you're looking at. For example, whereabouts they are, what habitat are they in, and what are they feeding on, what are they laying their eggs on. For example, this species here, which I'll tell you about in a bit, is on a cuckoo flower. So that helps you narrow it down straight away. Also the time of year. Now, the time of year is a tricky one, and I don't expect you to remember the flight seasons of every species. I certainly don't. And also, the thing about time of year is that it's getting less and less useful. As the climate continues to change and warm up, our seasons become a little bit blurred and the weather patterns become much more unpredictable, such that the cues butterflies rely on to emerge and to undergo certain stages in their life cycle are getting thrown rather asunder. So the time of year is becoming less useful. And to be honest, if you haven't ID'd it with the initial factors, the color and all of that, what it looks like, I don't know if time of year is going to help you. But anyway, it's there. It can help if need be. If push comes to shove, you can look at the flight seasons of the particular species you're thinking it might be. So let's start by moving through some of our butterfly species, not all 59, by their base colors. Let's start with the white ones. I think these are quite familiar and they certainly stand out when you do see them. Now you'll have heard, I'm sure, of the cabbage whites. Everybody talks about cabbage whites. Everybody cusses cabbage whites. I've cussed cabbage whites when they eat through my broccoli. But the cabbage white is not one species. The cabbage white, as it's colloquially known, generally refers to a few species. Among them are this one, the large white. Now the large white is just that. It's large and it's white. But as I said, size isn't perhaps that useful. So it's a white one, but there's a few other white ones as well. The biggest factor I tend to point out on the large white butterfly is these contrasting black wingtips. They're quite distinct. And even on the wing, with a bit of luck, you might be able to make out the contrasting wingtips there. Now, you can't see the underside of the wings on this photograph, I'm afraid. But if you could, I promise there would be two spots on the underside. The females, like this one here, have two spots on the forewings as well. But if you're getting to the point where you can tell male or female, then you've got to be pretty close, to be honest. At least from most perspectives, you'll get this black contrast against the white wing base there. Now, caterpillars, as I've just mentioned, they do feed on wild or nowadays cultivated members of the Brassicaceae, the cabbages, broccoli, that's where the name comes from. The large white does this, several of the whites do this. Now, the large white is one of quite a few butterfly species in the UK which get through 2 generations within one summer. They're on the wing from April to June. You probably have seen some already. And about now, that adult population is tailing off again. As we enter what beekeepers call the June gap, there's a bit of a drop in wildflower abundance out and about right now. And so that first generation has been out and about on the wing. They've mated, they've bred, they've laid their eggs, and they've died off now. And those eggs have hatched, and those caterpillars are now going to eat their way through July and into August, and then they will emerge as a second generation of these butterflies later in the summer, through August and September. I always forget there are arrows in this pointing out some of the key IDing features. So that there is the prominent black wingtip I talked about. Next up, after the large white, it's the small white. They're at least an attempt at being descriptive. Now here we've got black wingtips again, which are still there, but they are smaller and they are much more faded. You can see, even though it's on the opposite wing, I appreciate it's perhaps not the best photograph, I apologize, but you can see there is a dark wingtip there. It's just much more faded. So if a white butterfly should fly past you, it's got no other distinctive features, like a couple of more we're going to look at, then what I tend to do is try and see if I can see that contrasting wingtip. If I can, large white. If I can't, probably a small white. It's a fair old guess. Now, these guys have got 1 or 2 spots on the upper wing, a bit like the female of the large white, and you can see them here, the silhouettes of them shining through. The undersides of the wing don't have any spots, though. Large whites have those 2 spots on the underside. The small white don't have any. As I said, this is the silhouette of spots on the top. The underside is just a creamy, greeny white sort of color. So that's that at least helps to distinguish them from the large white. Once again, their caterpillars feed on the brassicas, hence they're grouped in that cabbage white term that I'm sure you've all heard. They have 2 generations as well. So there's a bit of a dip in them right now. I've not been seeing many white butterflies out and about on my surveys this week, or last week for that matter. And these get through 2 generations. Interestingly, for both the large and the small white, the 2nd generation, the dark bits are often even darker. Now, you're going to ask me why that is, so I'll get it out of the way straight away. I don't know. I don't know why that is. I'm yet to find out. I'm not a lepidopterist. I'm a general ecologist. And I'm afraid I can't answer that question, but it's an interesting thing to look out for when that 2nd generation appears later on in the summer. Now, this one is another white one, I know, but at least it's got a bit more of a distinctive feature, because when you're looking at these butterflies, one of the things you ought to be looking at straight away is the underside of the wings, because you can at least then rule out whether or not it's a green veined white. The green veined white, that's its most distinctive feature. It's got green veins. If you can see it from above, then yes, it does have black wingtips again, but they are broken up. Can you see there are gaps in the black wingtip here? Rather than the large whites, which was solid, and even the small whites was faded but solid. This green veined white has gaps in its black wingtips. But again, that really distinctive feature is the dark veins on the underside. Whether or not they're green is you know, up to you. But they're certainly prominent, noticeable, and we didn't see those on the large or small white. Once again, 2 generations in a summer. So right now, there are fewer about, and there will be until late July into August. That's the green veined white. Does what it says on the tin, really. So does the orange tip, or at least the male does. You look at the male over here, he's got orange wingtips, nice and easy. He's also got black wingtips, but that's just getting confusing now, isn't it? So the orange wingtips are the real distinctive feature on a male orange tip. The females, though, she's got no orange. She's got no orange on her at all. No orange wingtips. But both sexes have a really distinctive identifying feature underneath. If you look at the underside of these wings, you see this really beautiful, I think that's gorgeous, really lovely green marbling pattern. Isn't that nice? Now, both sexes have this, and that's a real key feature. So again, if you get to see the underside of the wing, that's what you're after. The flight season of the orange tip peaks in May because that coincides with their food plants, things like garlic mustard and cuckoo flower, also known as lady's smock. That's what this one is resting on over here. The females of this species will lay 1 egg on each cuckoo flower as they move around a meadow, and she will mark it with a pheromone to let everybody else know, I've already laid on this one, my caterpillar is going to eat it. And also, I suppose, to remind yourself not to lay a second one on there. So right now, these guys have really passed. We're not seeing so many orange tips on the wing, but you might. We're coming to the end of June now, but you might if you're lucky. Is that an arrow? There's an arrow. Now, we've done some white ones. We've done 4 white ones. That might not seem like many, but I don't want to overload you guys tonight because we are going to do quite a few butterflies. Next up, I'm going to have another sip of water because it's far too hot. I don't know how many times I'll say that tonight. And then we're going to do some blue ones. Now, the blue ones, again, when it comes to naming the blue species, first and foremost, they went with the obvious. Here's a common blue. It's reasonably common, not as common as it was, obviously, but the common blue largely does what it says on the tin, at least as long as it's male. Once again, we've got a female who bucks the trend. The male here, you can see, is very nice, very lovely blue color. Look at the blue fur on his back, gorgeous. He's got this white border all the way around, which is sometimes noticeable, sometimes obvious. The female, well, she went into that. Females, in fact, they vary across the country. Down here in Somerset, they are this sort of dark blue color with these orange lines on the trailing edges of each of their four wings. This, as I said, this is the female, this is the male, but that varies across the country. The biggest distinctive ID factor on the common blue butterfly is, like with so many other species, when they close their wings up. Have a look underneath. And what you've got here looks like a bit of a mess, but let's have a look. What we've actually got here, if we break it down, is oh, I thought there'd be an arrow there. The typical one, I want one, there isn't. Is this semicircle here of black dots. If the butterfly stood upright, it looked like a capital D backwards. So there's this semicircle of black dots. And then along that trailing edge of the wing, you've got this arc of orange splodges, as I call it. That's at least what I should be putting in my ID guide when I put one together. This arc of orange splodges, very distinct on the common blue. There are other blue species that have those orange splodges too, but I'm dealing with some of the most likely species you're going to see. So this is what the common blue looks like. These guys are on the wing now. They're just coming out now from June all the way through to September. So whilst the whites are fading, the common blues will be around for the rest of the summer, so you can enjoy those. Their caterpillars feed on bird's foot trefoil. I introduced bird's foot trefoil to my garden and it's doing really well. So fingers crossed, I'll get some common blues later this year. That would be very, very nice. Next up is another blue one. This time it's the holly blue, reasonably named, I think. Now it is similar to the common blue. It's blue. This time the females are too. Now they've got the white border, yes, but they've got some black bits on their wingtips, which the common blues don't have. On the females, this is particularly obvious because you can see it's like a big black smudge around that trailing edge of her forewings, that big black mark there. So you can straight away tell if they've got that on there, you're not looking at one of the male common blues, you're looking at a female holly blue. Perhaps the biggest distinctive factor between the holly blues and the common blues, though, is the underside of the wing once again. So if you have a look at that underside, we've not got any order to it really. It's a little bit haphazard, a little bit half-hearted if you ask me. What we've got here is just a scattering of black dots. There's no semicircle, no capital D, there's no arc of orange splodges. This is pretty poor work if you ask me. But anyway, it helps to differentiate between the two species. Now, these guys, once again, get through 2 generations in the summer. In the spring, caterpillars feed on holly. Then right now, coming into the summer months, the next generation of caterpillars feed on ivy. And then at the end of the year, they all get together and do a Christmas carol. They're yet to get to number 1. Here's a nice comparison. Oh, there's an arrow first. We've got to get the arrows out of the way. I'm going to take those out of this talk because I always forget they're there. Here's a nice comparison anyway between the common blue and the holly blue. The black marks are the distinctive feature on the upper wing of that holly blue. And really, as I said, it's the underside of the wing. If you compare these two, if you compare Paul and Philip here, it's the first time I've made that joke tonight. Paul here has got this arc of orange splodges, while Philip just a scattering of black dots. Then we'll move on to the small blue. And I say that with a little bit of hesitation because it's not really blue, is it? As I put there, it's more grey than blue. It's got a little bit of blue at a push if you squint, maybe in the right light. But no, it's more grey than blue. Now, this is a very small butterfly, 2 to 3 centimetres. That's only Diddy. And this relies entirely, as I put there, entirely on kidney vetch, both as an adult and as a caterpillar. As a caterpillar eats the greenery, as an adult, it feeds on the flowers. Now, that's great. That's fab if you've got loads of kidney vetch around. Trouble with being that specialised, of course, is if something should happen to the kidney vetch, you're done for. So it's a risky game to play. Now, these guys are on the wing now. Briefly, they've had this brief window early in the summer, May to June. They'll fade again now and will reappear with a second generation in late August. I haven't seen one of these yet this year, and I probably won't now till later in the summer, if I do at all. So keep your eyes peeled for a small blue. They're called small blues, of course, officially. Yeah. Now we're going to move on to some brown ones. When we're coming from blue ones, and what a fabulous color blue is to see in nature, you don't see it very often. Brown ones might sound a little bit dull by comparison. There's lots of brown things in nature, but because they're working with a brown base color, they've got to put extra effort in when it comes to decorating it, don't they? So let's see what they've come up with. I think it's just time for my periodic sip of water. The heat tonight is making my words fall apart. I apologize if I stutter every now and again. See, I've lost the word then. So this is a brown butterfly I've been seeing a lot of lately. Whilst the white butterflies have dropped off in the numbers I've been recording, the Meadow Brown is making up for it in spades. Now the Meadow Brown, yes, it's brown, and you guessed it, it likes to live around meadows because their caterpillars rely on grasses, long grasses. So much effort and impetus is given nowadays to wildflower meadows, and grass, all right, yeah, grass is we're all quite used to grass, and I think because of that it gets a little bit of a bad press. But we get a bit bored of grass. But grass is really important. Long grass is really important for so many species. The Meadow Brown among them. Now the Meadow Brown is brown. It's got a little bit of orange on its forewings though as well. You can see the orange sections there. We've also got, and this is a key feature you need to look for here, an eye spot, a black eye spot on the forewing, and in that spot is one white dot. On this picture here, I appreciate there's a little white speck behind it, but officially there is one white dot in the eye spot of a Meadow Brown. These guys are on the wing right now in their hundreds. As I said, from June all the way through to August, they will be there. And right now they are at their, well, probably not at their peak, but they are numerous. I did a butterfly survey, a pollinator survey at Kilkenny Fields last week in Portishead, and across the old golf course there, which is now wonderfully wild, and I counted well over 100 Meadow Browns. They are there in spades, so you can enjoy the Meadow Browns if you want. They're a really lovely species to see. These guys usually rest with wings closed, so this is the view you're going to be seeing when they've landed. Sometimes you can make out some black spots on the underside of the wing. You can't see it on this one. Then there's the Gatekeeper. Now the Gatekeeper, I know what you're going to say, it looks just like the Meadow Brown, and I know it does, but it is quite a bit smaller. I've not seen a Gatekeeper yet this year, but it's quite a little bit smaller, and there are ways of telling it apart from the Meadow Brown. Yes, it's brown, and yes, it's got orange on it. That orange, I grant you, is a little bit more variable on the Gatekeeper than it is on the Meadow Brown, but the most distinctive features, and you need to get quite close to see it, I know, is this eye spot again. There are 2 white dots in the black eye spot on the forewing of the Gatekeeper. Also, you'll see on the underside, if you get to see the underside, because this one sits with wings open, white dots. Can you see those white dots on the underside of that hind wing? So there we are. We've got 2 dots in the eye spot, 1 dot in the Meadow Brown, 2 in the Gatekeeper. One sits with wings closed, that's the Meadow Brown. One sits with wings open, that's the Gatekeeper. Hard to remember, but with practice, you'll get used to it. Here's a comparison. So in this instance, it's the Gatekeeper you're more likely to see like this, with wings open. 2 white dots in the eye spot, 1 on the Meadow Brown, and it's a bigger butterfly, that Meadow Brown. From the underside, which you're more likely to see the Meadow Brown in, there's none of these white dots, and there's just 1 white dot in the black eye spot. Now we're on to the Speckled Wood. We've already seen the Speckled Wood briefly tonight. And I put the Speckled Wood earlier on in the talk because the Speckled Wood's one of my favourites. In fact, I took this picture. Hope you like it. The Speckled Wood, as I said, is one of my favourites. I think that's a really handsome looking butterfly. It's gone with a darker brown than the Meadow Browns and the Gatekeepers, and it's dressed it up with this lovely line, this lovely trailing edge covered in eye spots. What a treat that is. Those eye spots are really quite distinctive. And these guys you will see amongst hedgerows and woodlands. Hedgerows are basically long, thin bits of woodland, a real aspect of the modern landscape, modern countryside. But the Speckled Woods are happy in hedgerows, particularly those mature hedgerows with trees, because the adults feed on the honeydew that the trees produce up in the treetops, rather than the flowers. These guys aren't interested in flowers. They're caterpillars, though. Need long grass again. They need long grass areas nearby. These adults need long grass areas nearby because that's where they're going to lay their eggs, and the caterpillars feed on the greenery of the long grasses. You'll often see these, particularly on warm days like today, basking in the sunshine in little patches of sunlight in a woodland glade, wherever you might be on your walks this summer. And they're quite territorial. The males particularly will chase other Speckled Woods, other males, other anything really, given the chance. And you'll see them fly off and go spiraling round and round and round one another. And I always think it'd be nice to put the Benny Hill theme as a backing for that, because it's quite comical the way they do it. A lovely butterfly to see though. And if you're out and it's a warm day, have a look on a mature hedgerow in the sunshine. you've got a good chance of seeing speckled woods. And what a treat they are. There's the arrow. There's the arrow. Now this chap, much more distinctive. This is a red admiral. Now we could talk about the white spots in the corners. We could talk about the fact that it's a dark brown colour, almost black. But let's be honest, we're not going to bother with any of that, are we? Because there's that great big red ring in the middle there. Well, reddy orange ring in the middle there. This band across the forewings and a band along the trailing edge of the hindwings makes this big reddy orange circle. Absolutely fab. Now, I've talked a little bit about the value of grasses. Species like this and distinctive and gorgeous species like this, their caterpillars rely on stinging nettles. A much maligned species in the UK, Urtica dioica. I remember at university, we were told the easy way to remember the scientific name for a stinging nettle, Urtica dioica, is because it hurts. And that's stayed with me to this day. So these guys rely on stinging nettles. If you don't have stinging nettles, you can forget your red admirals. Sometimes these guys stick around a little bit longer. They hibernate through the winter months. And should it warm up, should we have a warm day in the winter, again, much more common nowadays, they can stir from their slumber and become active again. Obviously very disappointed when they come out and see they've just missed Christmas and the flowers aren't out yet. So it's a little bit disruptive when it does happen, but they can be seen on warmer days throughout the year as a result. So that's the red admiral. Now we're going to cover a couple of butterfly species which are quite similar to one another. These are the skippers. There are a few skippers in the UK. We're just going to cover two of them. The large skipper and, spoiler, oh, the small skipper. Let's go back. The large skipper here is, well, let's talk about the distinctive features of the skippers. First and foremost, you can see that they're holding their wings in a particular way. They're a very distinctive orangey brown, almost golden colour. And those forewings are held back and raised slightly, about a 45-degree angle, maybe not quite, above the hindwings, like some sort of elaborate paper plane that I don't know how to make. Now, the large skipper is differentiated from the small skipper because if we look at those wingtips, there is, and I know it is faint, a checkered pattern on the corner of the wings. So you're going to have to squint to see that. I appreciate that. It's not enough to have a game on, is it? But still, this faint checkered pattern on the corner of the wings. Males like this one have a dark line through the center of the forewing. That tells us it's a boy. Now, these guys love feeding on brambles. Brambles, another much maligned group of species. People are always scrub bashing, ripping out brambles left, right, and center. Leave them, they're lovely. They're great. Nature's tree guards, and they feed so many species throughout the year. Brambles are great. They're caterpillars. Here's another one. Feed on grasses, long grasses, like cocksfoot, purple moorgrass. You won't know what sorts of grasses you've got in your garden unless you let them grow a little bit taller. And when you let them grow a little bit taller, these guys love it. Here's another skipper, the small skipper. Not much smaller, I grant you. So as I said earlier on, the size is perhaps not the most distinctive feature here. As I put there, slightly smaller than the large skipper. Males, again, have a dark line. It's very awkward to see in this one through the center of the forewing. Their caterpillars feed on Yorkshire fog and lots of other grasses. Now, let's talk about how to identify this one. We looked on that large skipper at that faint checkered pattern in the corner of the wing. Well, I don't know whether they got fed up with checkers or what, but on the small skipper, they've just got a black smudge. They just rubbed it out, smudged all around that wing edge there. So that's quite distinctive for telling the difference between the two. Both of those species will be on the wing from now till late summer into August. Little comparison for you here. So the large skipper, as you can see, has got these checkered wingtips, checkered patterns on its wingtips, and the small skipper instead has a black smudge around the edge. I appreciate we're going through quite a lot tonight. Don't worry, there aren't too many more. I don't want to overload you, and I know it's hot. So bear with me, bear with me. If you're taking notes, fab. If not, you can always watch this talk back. Best way to do is to get out into the wild and have a look at some of these species, see what you can see and practice your ID that way. Now, this next species is a real favorite of mine. It really, really is. I mean, how could it not be a favorite? Look at that. Look at that. Unhappy with just going, I'll be brown and boring. No, 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 no. The small tortoiseshell said, I'm going to go all out. What patterns shall I have? How many patterns shall I have, should I say? On the leading edge of that, for those forewings, look, tiger stripes. The really gorgeous tiger stripe pattern that barring along the leading edge of the forewings. Really, really lovely to see. And along the trailing edge, all the way around, can you see this lovely sort of pearlescent blue border, bluey purple pearls all the way around. Really, really lovely. If that's not a design for Paris Fashion Week next year, I don't know what is. That's really, really lovely. Now, these are one of the first butterflies to appear in the spring. So with that in mind, I have seen lately a few of them looking a bit tatty because they've been around since early in the spring. But they'll have bred now, and their second generation will appear later on in the year and move into gardens where there's often a few more flowers about later on in the year, because we've got all sorts of non-native and domestic varieties in the autumn time. So you might see these small tortoiseshells move into your gardens later on, if you haven't seen some out and about already. Caterpillars of the small tortoiseshell, that really gorgeous butterfly. Remember how gorgeous the adults are. The caterpillars feed on stinging nettles, so we need some nettles. Well, that could be a t-shirt right there. And then we move on to the painted lady. Now, the painted lady, well, I mean, it's a bit of a poor man's small tortoiseshell, isn't it? If you won't shoot me for saying that. No, I think really, you'll see what I mean. It's the same sort of pattern as a small tortoiseshell. It's just a bit washed out. That tiger barring that we saw so beautifully on the tortoiseshell, well, it's run in the wash, look. And that pearlescent border, that lovely blue and purple border all the way along the trailing edge. Well, they put the frames in here, look, but they didn't get the blue paint. Couldn't afford it. Don't know what the excuse was there. So we just get this trailing edge of black dots along the back. It's fine. It's fine. It's all right. The most distinctive feature at a push of the painted lady are these slightly redder patches towards the front edge of the wing. Yeah. That's all you can really say about the painted lady. Sorry if you're a painted lady fan, but when we've just looked at the small tortoiseshell, you know, it pales. Now, the caterpillars of these guys, pretty as they are, I'll give them their dues. These guys feed on nettles, thistles too, another much maligned, much lambasted group of species in the UK. Viper's bugloss, a lovely plant if you've got that in your garden, and others too. This one, we're moving on from the painted lady. We're going to a very handsome butterfly now. This is a small copper. And as I put there, it's a lovely little butterfly. You can tell I've written these slides myself because that's exactly how I would describe it. It's how I'd write it in a guidebook. It's a lovely little chap. I'm yet to see these guys out on the wing yet. They won't be around just yet, but they're nearly here. So the small coppers are just lovely. You can see there's quite a bit going on with those wings, but let me break it down for you nice and simply. The forewings are orange with a brown border, and the hind wings are brown with a black with an orange border. Yes, there's some black spots as well, but you don't need to worry about those really. Orange with a brown border, brown with an orange border. That's just your small copper. They are small, a little bit bigger than the small blue, but the small copper is a very nice little neat, very handsome butterfly. I really like that. That color palette he's gone for. That's a smart one. He gets a tick from me. The caterpillars of these guys feed chiefly on sorrels. Now, sorrels we do see on a lot of grassland sites. They're allowed to grow a little bit wilder, and these guys will benefit wonderfully from that. Now, here's the comma. One of the volunteers I was out with today said the same thing I do about commas. That wing shape there is brilliant. Very, very distinctive. I talked about wing shape earlier on, and this is perhaps the best example of distinctive wing shapes of all of our butterflies. Look at that. It looks like it's been dragged through a hedge backwards, and that's sort of the plan, because when its wings are closed, it's supposed to look like dead leaves which can then rustle in the wind to deter any potential predators. But the Victorian naturalists, or whoever decided to name this one, decided, no, I shall ignore all that. I won't call it the dead leaf butterfly or the tatty winged. I don't know. You could be all inventive. You could go all Shakespearean on it. No. He went, have a look on the underside of the wing. He said, can you see that white mark there? Looks like a comma, doesn't it? Does it really? I mean, that's scraping the barrel. That's a little bit tenuous. But anyway, that's where the comma name comes from. I know. Don't take it up with me. It's not my, wasn't my name. What a lovely butterfly. The adults you'll see out and about, particularly in the next couple of months, come into August time, you might see these guys feeding on blackberries on the bramble bushes in your hedgerows. But the caterpillars will feed largely on nettles. If you haven't got any nettles, you can forget seeing these guys later on and enjoying that wonderful comma on the other side. Right. Here's a peacock. Now, I don't really need to say much about the peacock butterfly. because you probably know what this one is. It's really quite distinctive. It's almost red in colour. And it's got those very, very distinctive eye spots, like a peacock. These on the peacock butterfly, though, are to deter predators. When approached by a predator, what they do is they open their wings, they flash their wings open, and sometimes they'll even sort of beat them on the substrate, say they're stood on some wood or whatever. They'll beat them on there, make a slight noise, and it really does startle any potential predators, a bird or whatever it might be. These guys, like the red admirals, can hibernate through the winter. So sometimes you might accidentally disturb them when you're going about your business. I say that because I've done it myself. And I certainly was startled when lifting a plank of wood out the back of my stable. And there were 3 hibernating peacock butterflies on the underside. By the time I'd seen them, it was too late. And they knew I was there. And off they went, flashing, beating their wings on the board. That's why I said a piece of wood, because that was my experience. Beating their wings and showed me, honestly, it would frighten any predator. It certainly put the willies at me. But I let them put them back nice and gently and left them to it. Once again, here's another very beautiful species whose caterpillars rely on the much maligned stinging nettle. There's the arrow. There's the arrow pointing to perhaps the most distinctive feature on any of our butterflies. And finally, you'll be glad to hear me say finally, I'm sure. Finally, we arrive at the brimstone. Now, the brimstone, what a name. That name conjures up all sorts of images, the brimstone butterfly of the old world, of ancient times. Now, this one does have a nice piece of history to it. In fact, it's supposedly the original butterfly, because the males have a yellowy coloured wing, which in the sunshine, oh yeah, they are sort of butter coloured. They're not all yellow. Sometimes they're a little bit greeny. If your butter is this colour, check it out. But what a lovely butterfly either way. The males are really quite distinctive. When you see one of these flying, even at a distance, they're quite large, and that bright yellow or green colour is really distinctive. Unlike some of the other butterflies with the more rounded wingtips, these guys come to lovely points, such that their wings almost look like leaves. And I think that's lovely. The females are a bit paler, often a greenish white colour, and they have got these still got these brown dots like the male does. A caterpillar of these guys feeds on buckthorn. What a lovely species that is. A nice one to end on. Now, let's have a little pause, just a breather. Just lie back, have a sip of your drink, and then we're going to try a few out. We're just going to go through a few of them and see how we get on. Now, I don't want anybody to rush and put answers in the chat. You can write them down. You can say them to yourself, shout them to your neighbour, put them in a poem or a song. I don't mind. Just keep it to yourself for now. Anyway, let's try a few. Let's go through a few and test out our ID skills. First of all, what do we think this is? Have a think to yourself. We'll just have a few seconds and we'll talk through some of those ID features. So first of all, we've got this very striking tiger stripes, that barring along the leading edge. And then we've got the blue pearl border all around the trailing edge. This one is the small tortoiseshell. Lovely. This one, and it's brown. It's brown and it's got orange on it, but let's hold on to the brown. It's got a little white speck there, which we'll ignore, but mainly it's got one white dot in a black eye spot. There aren't any white dots on the underside of the hind wing. So it's not a gatekeeper, it's a meadow brown. It's a meadow brown. Well done if you got meadow brown on that one. Now this one, that's not white, that's blue. That's a very, very pale blue, and that's your big clue. If you can see the top edge of the opposite wing there, I know its wings are closed. It's perhaps not the best photo to show you, but it's got this black smudge around the edge of the wing, which tells us it's probably not a common blue. And sure enough, if we look at the underside of the wing, we've not got any arc of orange splodges, no semicircle, no capital D of black dots. We've just got a scattering. They just chucked them everywhere. They didn't care when they put this one together. This is a holly blue. Let's have a look at this one. Now, straight away, from the colour of it, from that golden orangey brown, it's a very nice shade of brown, that I think, makes this quite distinctive as one of the skippers. We can also see that in the fact that those forewings are held aloft over the hind wings, rather than in front, like that classic cartoon butterfly shape. No, these guys look like a fancy paper plane, like I said. Now, if you look closely, you can see, and I mean closely, there's a faint checkerboard pattern on the wings of this butterfly, which tells us it's the large skipper. It's the same photo we saw earlier. And this one, no points for this one really. This is the orange tip. If you've been listening from the start, you'll know that. And specifically, it's a male orange tip. Even if it didn't have the orange tips, we could tell it was an orange tip. If it turned over, at least, you might be able to see just about through the hind wing. There's that lovely green marbling that we talked about earlier on. So that's a good little overview, I think, of a lot of our butterfly species. We've covered quite a few. I think we've covered about 19 there. I don't expect you to remember them all. I'm not going to test you or anything like that. But hopefully you've got some good pointers there on how to ID some of the species you're hopefully going to see this summer. When you've got all this ID knowledge, of course, you could put it to good use. And when you've got this, this skill, which I hope you've at least started to gain from tonight, it's important to put it into monitoring butterflies. Now, 3/4 of the UK's butterflies have declined since the 1970s. I said that earlier on, and that's why monitoring is just so important. Not just for the butterfly's sake either. Butterflies are really great indicators of other environmental changes. As I said earlier on, when they've got caterpillars which rely on one food plant, butterflies which rely on another, some species which migrate long distances, some which rely on long grasses, some which they rely on so many different things. That means that they are a great way of taking the pulse of the wider environment. If something has changed in the butterfly population of any given species, then it's a fair indicator that something has changed in the wider environment and can help us to pin that down. Whether it's from climate change, whether it's from a change in land management or anything like that, there are lots of things that could be going wrong, and these butterflies may be a sentinel of that change and help us know that something is up and we need to fix it. Now, if you're out and about spotting butterflies, you can always submit your casual records through a few apps. It's the modern way, obviously. You can use iRecord, where your species observations go straight to the county recorder for the butterflies for wherever you live. iRecord is good so long as you know what species it is already. You can upload a photo with it and just put in butterfly, and your county recorder will be able to then ID it for you. But otherwise, there are other apps which can help you to ID things. iRecord Butterflies is one such app. There's also things like iNaturalist. A few of you may well be familiar with iNaturalist. I use it a lot. It's really, really fab. It's a great thing to do. And iNaturalist will help you to identify the species by using a photograph. A photograph which will then, it will scan it and see what it looks like and what's been recorded nearby. There's a wonderful community aspect to iNaturalist wherein other people can also help you to ID your species as well. So all of those things, when you submit records via iRecord or iNaturalist, they can contribute to local and national monitoring schemes, which can help the butterflies overall. And as I said, other species too, by helping us monitor trends in the wider environment. There's the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, which is run by Butterfly Conservation. And in the project I'm working on, we've slightly modified this and used it on a smaller scale, I grant you. With the UK BMS, what they do is you walk a large transect through the flight season of most butterflies, April to September, spring and summertime. You record during the heat of the day, during the middle of the day when it's warmest, it's bright and warm. They say between 10:45 and 3:45. I don't think the butterflies are sat there with a watch waiting, going, I can't go out yet, it's only 10:43. But still, it's a good indication of go out in the warmth of the day. And it's important that you follow the same route every time, walking slowly, walking nice and gently, recording butterflies that you see 2.5 meters either side of you and up to 5 meters in front because you're going that way anyway. Now, we've adapted that method very slightly for the monitoring that we're doing on some of North Somerset's rewilding sites. Now, North Somerset Council, you may already be aware, have made a wonderful decision to change the management of 1/4 of their amenity grassland. Amenity grassland is your parks, public spaces, roadside verges. Now, 25% might not sound like much, but when you look at it, the amenity grassland that councils have, most of it is tied up in playing fields, which you have to keep regularly mown because it's a playing field. And in a lot of places, you know, like road corners and things like that, driver visibility has to come first. But what they've managed to identify is a whole 25%, which is actually quite a lot of land, of their amenity grassland, which they don't need to mow as regularly as they have been. They don't need to do fortnightly mows. And instead, on some of it, they've moved to cutting it just once a year at the end of the summer months, once everything's grown up and gone to seed. And in other areas, they've planted trees, and in those spots, it to grow wild. No cutting at all. It's looking really great. And that's why we at the Wildlife Trust got involved was to monitor the changes in biodiversity as a result of those changes in management. And so far, so good. It is looking excellent. As I said, just last week, just today, in fact, I was out there walking across an old golf course in Portishead. Well, golf courses are very regularly mown, as you can imagine. Now it's growing wild and it is full of life, absolutely full. Last week's pollinator survey I did, I was counting hundreds of butterflies. We were well over 100 quite quickly. It's fab what a difference it's making, and that's why we're involved. There's also a huge impetus to involve you guys, to involve local people, and that's what we've been doing. So these survey sessions that I'm referring to have been public survey sessions. Some of you might have already been along to some. If you haven't, I'd urge you to join us because they're really great fun. Today's was fab. We were doing sweet netting in Portishead. It was really great. We've got regular survey sessions running through most of the summer. In fact, now we've got survey groups, we've got volunteer groups establishing in most areas. So you'll be able to come along and have a go with these volunteer groups and take part in some of this monitoring work and put your skills to good use. There's more training available, like sessions like this one, but the best training I think comes from doing it in the field, getting your eye in and getting some practice, whilst also contributing to some real citizen science. And having a nice time too. As I said earlier on, butterflies are only active during the sunshine, so we don't go out in the rain, which means we get to have a nice afternoon, enjoying the sunshine. Days like today, perhaps it's a little bit hot. We sat under the shade of some trees to go through our sweep nets and look at all the wonderful invertebrates we were finding there. But if you'd like to join in or just find out more, you can head to avonwildlifetrust.org.uk/NS Rewilding, or you can email me at nsrewilding@avonwildlifetrust.org.uk. Now, I'll flash my references there. I'll pop the details back up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording. As soon as I can get the menu to pop up, I'm going to stop recording now. So if you're recording, thanks for watching. Drop me an email if you need to.